This week, the Pope's Advisory Panel begins its work. We learn when John Paul II and John the 23rd will be canonized, and Pope Francis visits Assisi. All this and more coming up. Hello and welcome to Vatican Connections. It's been an exciting week. The much-awaited canonization announcement was made this week. John Paul II and John the 23rd will be made saints on April 27th, 2014. That's also Divine Mercy Sunday. The announcement was made on Monday at a meeting with the cardinals present in Rome. The head of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints gave a brief outline of the lives and heroic virtues of the two men. Pope Francis then announced the date for the ceremony. The cardinals had been consulted in advance in writing and had a chance to express their ideas before the consistory. Preparation now begins in earnest, both in Rome and elsewhere, as faithful from around the world start planning their pilgrimage for the canonizations. There were also some big firsts for the Vatican this week. The Institute for Works of Religion, or IOR, released its first ever annual financial report. This is one of the many things the so-called Vatican Bank is doing to be more transparent and to comply with international rules against money laundering. The president of IOR, Ernst von Freiberg, spoke exclusively to Vatican Radio about the report. Here's what he had to say.
For someone who is following us over the last 6 months, there are no new facts about what we do, how our customers are, what our mission is. What is new is the details in which our accounts are prepared. The most surprising thing will be how unsurprising it is. You'll see a rather conservative managed financial institution, safeguarding assets, investing in very conservative investments, being government bonds and bank deposits, and being highly capitalized. At the end of last year, our equity ratio was 15%, which is way above what comparable financial institutions would have.
Von Freiberg also said IOR has enlisted the help of the Promontory Group from the U.S. to look into all of the accounts held with it to ensure that each account is linked to a person or religious institution. He said this is an important step towards ensuring no money is being laundered through IOR. The other highly anticipated first at the Vatican was the meeting between Pope Francis and his Council of Cardinals. Catholic News Service has more.
An international council of cardinal advisors wrapped up 3 days of meetings with Pope Francis this week as part of a broader effort to reform the Vatican bureaucracy. The 8 cardinals, which include Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley and Sydney Cardinal George Pell, were appointed in April by the Pope to advise him on the governance of the Universal Church. The Pope and his cardinal advisors are laying out plans to completely overhaul the Roman Curia and underline its role as being in service to the Universal Church and the local churches. Some major themes that were the focus of discussion included the role and responsibilities of the Vatican's Secretary of State, the revamping of the World Synod of Bishops, and the Church's attention to the role and responsibility of the laity. The reform of the Curia, which is the Church's central administrative offices, will involve much more than cosmetic touch-ups or changes to the apostolic constitution on the Roman Curia called Pastor Bonus. Pastor Bonus, published in 1988, was the last major set of changes in the Roman Curia. It was largely an effort at streamlining by reassigning responsibilities among the various offices rather than an extensive reform. This time around, however, a whole new constitution will be drawn up that reflects a whole new way of thinking about the Curia's structure, focus, and how it works. Another topic was the reform of the Synod of Bishops, which organizes periodic meetings of bishops from around the world to advise the Pope on specific subjects. Pope Francis has suggested that he wants to make it into a permanent advisory body and that there might be possible revisions to the body statutes. However, the Vatican downplayed expectations that the group's discussions will lead to major changes in the near future. The 8 cardinals are expected to continue their work as they return to their archdiocese or other duties, and they will convene again at the Vatican early next year.
The highlight of the week had to be the papal visit to Assisi, and we'll have more on that in just a few minutes. The Church is holy. She does not refuse sinners. On the contrary, she welcomes them. She is open even to those who are most distant. She calls to all who allow themselves to be surrounded by the mercy, tenderness, and forgiveness of the Father, who offers to all the opportunity to encounter him and to walk the path to holiness. Time to see who's gotten a new job this week with a Rinunce Nomine. Newark has a coadjutor. Archbishop Bernard Hebda becomes coadjutor working with Archbishop James Mayers. When Archbishop Mayers retires, or if he dies, Hebda will automatically become the Archbishop of Newark. In Louisiana, Huma Thibodeau Bishop Sam Jacobs has retired, and Bishop Shelton Faber has been appointed to succeed him. Bishop Faber is from New Roads, Louisiana, and has been serving as auxiliary of New Orleans. Rockhampton, Australia is now awaiting the appointment of a new bishop. Bishop Brian Heenan's resignation was accepted this week after he passed the mandatory age limit for bishops. In Ireland, Bishop William Lee of Waterford and Lismore has resigned. Now, he is only 71 years old, not yet at the mandatory age limit. In a statement posted on the diocese website, Bishop Lee told parishioners and priests he was diagnosed with a serious medical condition in 2011, and his doctors have now advised him to retire. Bishop Lee was accused also of not removing a priest from ministry in 1993 after allegations of abuse surfaced. Some have attempted to link that case to his resignation. However, Bishop Lee did study and remove that priest from ministry in 1995, and he reported those allegations to the local police. In Vietnam, Paul Bu Van Dock was appointed coadjutor of Ho Chi Minh. And in Metz, France, Bishop Pierre Raffin retired, and Bishop Jean-Christophe Laglise succeeds him.
Non sapevano perché il vescovo di Roma ha voluto chiamarsi Francesco. Alcuni pensavano a Francisco Saverio, a Francisco de Sales, anche a Francisco de Assisi. Io vi racconterò la storia. Nell'elezione io avevo accanto a me l'arcivescovo emerito di San Paolo e anche prefetto emerito della Congregazione per il Clero, il cardinale Claudio Umes, un grande amico. Quando la cosa diveniva un po' pericolosa, lui mi confortava, no? E quando i voti sono saliti a 2/3, viene l'applauso consueto perché è stato eletto il Papa. E lui mi abbracciò, mi baciò e mi ha detto: non ti dimentichi dei poveri. E quella parola è entrata qui, i poveri. Poi subito, in relazione ai poveri, ho pensato a Francesco de Assisi. Poi ho pensato alle guerre, mentre lo scrutinio proseguiva, fino a tutti i voti. E Francesco è l'uomo della pace. E così è venuto il nome nel mio cuore, Francesco d'Assisi. E per me l'uomo della povertà, l'uomo della pace, l'uomo che ama e custodisce il creato. In questo momento in che noi abbiamo col creato una relazione non tanto buona, no? È l'uomo che ci dà questo spirito di pace, l'uomo povero. Come vorrei una chiesa povera e per i poveri.
As we mentioned off the top of the program, it's been a full week at the Vatican, especially for Pope Francis. He celebrated Mass with catechists on Sunday. He told them catechists are people who keep the memory of God alive. They put the faith in its entirety on center stage, not themselves. If we forget the real God, he said, the real meaning of life is lost and everything boils down to one thing: having. The Mass and audience with catechists was part of events organized by the Pontifical Council for the New Evangelization for the Year of Faith. The theme for the Pope's message for World Day for Social Communications was released this week. The theme is Communication at the Service of an Authentic Culture of Encounter. Now, the Pope is still writing the actual message, but it's expected to be released January 24th, which is the feast day of St. Francis de Sales, the patron saint of journalists. The World Day for Social Communications is usually celebrated on the Sunday before Pentecost. Wednesday, of course, was the general audience. He spoke about the Church being holy, not because it's made up of saints, but because it's loved by God. He said the Church is made up of sinners and welcomes everyone, even those who are the furthest removed from the Church. He asked the people gathered in the square, "Are any of you here without your sins?" No, none of us. We all carry our sins with us, but the Lord wants to hear us say, "Forgive me, help me walk, transform my heart." And the Lord does transform us. In a church, we don't find a heartless judge, but a father. Thursday, the Pope met with people participating in a convention marking the 50th anniversary of Pacem in Terris, the encyclical written by Pope John XXIII in 1963. Now, he asked the participants, are we prepared to meet the challenge posed by Pacem in Terris? As if in answer to his own question, Pope Francis described the world economic crisis as inhuman and expressed his deep sorrow for the latest maritime tragedy off the coast of the Italian island of Lampedusa on Thursday, in which many refugees lost their lives. Calling the tragedy shameful, he asked everyone to renew our efforts to ensure that such tragedies are not repeated. And Friday was Pope Francis's much-anticipated visit to Assisi, the place that shaped the spirituality of his namesake, St. Francis. His visit lasted about 12 hours altogether. He started the visit going to the Seraphic Institute Hospital, which is home to handicapped children. It took a while to get things started because he greeted as many of the children as he could individually. When he finally got to the front of the room, he ignored his prepared text and told the gathered people, "We are among the wounds of Christ." He said he was reminded of the two disciples who didn't recognize the risen Christ until he showed them his wounds. He said Jesus is here, hidden in these boys and girls, these children, in these people, and they need to be heard. From there, he went on to the Archbishop's residence, to the very room where St. Francis renounced all his worldly possessions and removed his clothes in exchange for second-hand rags. It was the first time in 800 years a pope visited that room. There, Pope Francis met with poor people receiving help from Caritas. He spoke about how the Church must renounce worldly things, but the Church is made up of all of us individuals, therefore each person is invited to renounce worldliness. Francis told the group, "Many of you have been stripped by this savage world that doesn't offer jobs, doesn't help, to which it doesn't matter that there are children dying of hunger in the world." He recalled Thursday's tragedy off the coast of Lampedusa and said, "Today is a day of weeping." Returning to the idea of renouncing worldliness, he said it is contrary to the Beatitudes, it is the leprosy, the cancer of society. Before celebrating Mass at St. Francis Square, he stopped to visit the tomb of his namesake saint, and during his homily, he said there are 3 things St. Francis's life teaches us. First, being a Christian means having a relationship with Christ. Second, whoever follows Christ receives true peace, the peace only Christ can give and not the world. And third, St. Francis teaches us the need to respect everything God created, not damaging it by experimenting with it, but by helping it grow. Instead of a fancy lunch with the bishops of the region, the Pope had lunch at the local Caritas Center with a group of people who are receiving assistance from that aid organization. After lunch, he met with representatives of different groups from the diocese, including members of religious communities, and went to visit the Basilica of St. Clare. He prayed before the saint's tomb and the crucifix of St. Damien, the same crucifix that St. Francis was praying in front of when he experienced his conversion. Speaking to the Sisters of St. Clare, Pope Francis said, "Cloistered nuns are called to be human, to understand people, and to pray for them." He added, "It's awful to meet nuns who are not truly happy, but continue to smile like a flight attendant, and people can tell the difference." From there, he met with young people from the province of Umbria and visited the Porziuncola, the little church given to St. Francis around 1208, and which became the home to St. Francis and his first companions. Before flying back to Rome, the Pope stopped at the sanctuary of Rivotorto, where St. Francis and his early followers first lived. That moving visit to Assisi ended the Pope's public engagements for the week. Now, even though the announcement has just been made, we've already received a lot of questions about the canonization for John Paul II and John the 23rd. It's still quite a ways away, and even though canonizations and mega events are a regular occurrence at the Vatican, this one is going to take some extra work. So, if you're thinking of going to Rome for the canonization, there are 2 things to keep in mind. First, hotels and flights will fill up fast, so book them soon. Second, the U.S. Bishop's Office for Visitors to the Vatican told us that it's actually the Diocese of Rome that will be organizing all the events that weekend apart from the Mass itself. So the best thing to do is to keep an eye on the Diocese of Rome website, vicariatusurbis.org, which you see on your screen. I'll be keeping an eye on that website for you as well, and I'll bring you the details as they become available. One thing we already know, because of the volume of people expected to attend the Mass, tickets will not be required to get in. Just show up. Vatican Connections is interactive. Send us your questions or comments by Facebook, Twitter, email, or post. Via email, send comments to info@saltandlighttv.org, and by post, send letters to 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C 1P1, Canada. Finally, this week we give you a closer look at Assisi and how it shapes both the Franciscan spirituality and Pope Francis.
Alla Verna al Monte Santo stava il Santo in gran pianto, il qual pianto gli muta in canto, il serafin consola.
The stones talk here. It's because Francis has left an imprint in this place. I had to write a little guidebook, for example, at one stage. And there's so many books written about Francis, it's hard to find a title. The editor of the book suggested, well, perhaps you'd say Francis lived here. I said, that's good, but it's not quite right. Francis lives here.
That a pope gets to choose a name first is the interesting part, because names are given to us, from our parents or whatever. When you're in a religious community, you take a religious name, you don't choose it, it's given to you. So he wants to evoke something in us. He wants us to think about, what does Francis mean? Francis's example is what we're looking at, of someone who was a radical Christian. We don't want to highlight so much Francis as we want to highlight what Francis did. I think that's what you will see in Pope Francis's life. He's calling us to look at Francis because Francis has inspired him. The simplicity that he has is its clarity, its ability to be understood in his actions. So I think really the actions, the simple actions, the simplicity that he chooses in his vestments and what he does and how he does it allows us a clarity, a transparency.
When he speaks of Francis of Assisi, he also implies the person of Clare of Assisi. And Clare was the feminine dimension of Francis. Clare and Francis, even with 11, 12 years span in their lives of difference in years, Clare became aware of Francis as she was growing in Assisi, and his strong attraction to the Lord, his strong attraction to conversion, his strong attraction to reconciling differences. And Clare, as a result of her family's background and living in the nobility part of Assisi, shared the same love for reconciling differences, shared the same desire to bring all things together, the poorest of the poor and the noblest of the nobility.
The story of St. Francis is very beautiful, because Francis was very ambitious. He wanted to be the first at the top in everything. But Jesus told him to follow another way, the way of humility. And this is very beautiful. And he began going to war. He was in jail for 1 year. And all these stories inside his stories, his life, were signs of the presence of God that was asking him to be humble. And Francis discovered that humility is the way to meet Jesus. And it is very beautiful when I listened to the name of the new Pope, Francis. Wow, I was close to cry. It was very, very beautiful. And I thought, it is a very humble man. And but the first step of this humility was the gesture of Pope Benedict leaving the place. And after this gesture of humility, a humble man, Pope Francis.
I think it is a dilemma for everyone to live the life of simplicity and poverty according to their situation. And I think so far Pope Francis has shown us in the way he dresses, the way he wants to live, and the message that he brings across in his simplicity. Because with all the world looking at him, I think he still has in mind that the glory of the world passes, just as they used to say to popes when they were being crowned, as it were. So that passes, but there's one thing that doesn't pass, and the words of Jesus Christ. And that's what he intends to listen to.
That's all for Vatican Connections this week. Join us next time as we keep up with what's going on inside the heart of the Church. We're going to leave you now with a clip from a conversation that our own Sebastian Gomes had with Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga. The Honduran cardinal is one of the so-called C8 cardinals, but Sebastian asked him about his personal feelings at having a Latin American pope. And that's it for this week. See you next time, and thank you for watching.
What does it mean for you that we have a Latin American pope, being a Latin American yourself?
You know, we have been wishing this from a long, long time, because in America, in the continent, Canada, United States, and Latin America are more than the half part of the Catholics in the world. So it was the time that papacy cannot be only Euro-centered, but world-centered. And so now it means a great hope. I think Francis is answering, responding to this hope, and of course giving more hope for the people.